There are actors, there are movie stars, and there are cinematic icons. Piper Laurie has certainly earned her iconic status as a working actor since the 1950s. She's been nominated for 3 Academy Awards in 3 different decades, as Sarah Packard in 1961's The Hustler alongside Paul Newman, as Willa Norman in 1986's Children of a Lesser God, and smack dab in the middle of these in 1976 as Margaret White in Brian De Palma's adaptation of Stephen King's debut novel, Carrie. Her award recognition for this role is especially impressive because the Academy rarely recognizes horror films, so for them to recognize both Piper Laurie and Sissy Spacek for their performances in Carrie was pretty unusual. Miss Laurie also played 2 roles in David Lynch's Twin Peaks. Catherine Martell in the mysterious Mr. Tojimura, a role for which she was credited as Fumio Yamaguchi. Crediting an alias for your creative work? Richard Bachman would be proud. Miss Laurie passed away at age 91 on October 14th, 2023 in Los Angeles. I was lucky enough to be able to speak with her about her role as Margaret White, as well as the many other milestones in her impressive career. Here's Piper Laurie. I did just want to start out a little bit about your early career before we get into Carrie, because Carrie is a kind of interesting, almost second act to your career.
Well, I started out as a terribly shy little girl, and I never talked to anyone. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't have anything to say. So my parents at an early age encouraged me to do things that required speaking in public. Eventually, I became a part of an acting class, and I began to take it seriously after I saw a very wonderful performance in a play that I couldn't forget. And that's how I got interested in acting. Also, it gave me freedom that I didn't feel as a child.
You almost felt like you could be somebody else and disassociate a little bit?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I remember in the junior high, this girl, a very popular girl, Chicky, said she wanted to speak to me. And she said, "Oh, Rosetta," which is my real name. She said, "Rosetta, you're getting to be really cute now with your haircut and everything. The only thing, you just had some personality." And I thought, my God, she's right. I don't have any personality. And so that was me for all those young years. It took years for me to be able to verbalize anything and also have self-respect and realize I was becoming a person and I could be brave and do things.
How did that transition then into getting your first role? You were in Louisa, right, with Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan? The actor?
Well, many years, and I was in a really good acting class. Very lucky that I got to work with the Schneiders, Benno and Batami Schneider, who had come from Russia and worked with the Habima players in Israel, and then came to New York, worked with the group theater. And they had a wonderful background and good, solid ideas. And they had classes, very small classes. And I was just lucky. Somebody suggested that, and I was part of the class. I had an interview. Somehow I had an agent. I don't know how that happened, and he took me out to Universal, and they liked me, and they put me in my first movie, playing Ronald Reagan's daughter.
Well, I still don't believe Grandma would do anything foolish.
Kathy, you are 17 years of age. You have no idea the behavior of people in their 60s.
What a first role.
Yeah.
You did a number of pictures for Universal, and in your memoir, you called it kind of a picture factory, right? Where you started to kind of realize that you were getting the same roles, and you ended up getting out of your contract.
Yes, I stood it for 5 or 6 years, and then finally they sent me another one of those horrible scripts, and I just had it, and I threw the script in the fireplace, and I called my agent, and I said, "I don't care if they want to jail me for breaking the contract, but I'm never going to work again unless I can do something I can respect." They finally believed me and they let me out of the contract. I had to make some sort of deal with them to do a certain amount of pictures for no money. And I was glad to get rid of them. But I waited almost a year before I was offered a decent part in a live television show. They didn't think I could learn the words and, I'd fall apart in live television. And finally, I got an offer for a nice part in a Robert Montgomery Presents television show that was done live in New York. And so I flew there. My agent, who was the head of the Morris office at that time, said, "Oh, no, movie stars don't do television." But I went anyway. The next day, I was in New York, and I had lunch with my agents who I'd never met because there was no reason to be in New York in their office. And he said, "Oh, your show was terrific." And I had a phone call from Joe Mankiewicz, who said he saw it, and he said that was one of the best performances I've ever seen from a young actress. And I was so touched, and I didn't believe it, because I'd only heard stories about how awful I was, and the reviews were so terrible. And the one time I was in an audience with my father next to me, and we heard the people next to him in agony having to watch me on the screen. They didn't know I was there. So anyway, I was so moved by what I'd heard about Joe Mankiewicz, I didn't believe it. So my agent got him on the phone, and Mr. Mankiewicz told me himself what he thought. That was the moment my career changed.
And that was what led to The Hustler?
I'm the emancipated type. Real emancipated.
A few years later, that was the beginning of doing live television, where I learned a lot. It was very hard. It was exciting, and I'm proud of the work I did. I did the original Days of Wine and Roses. I'd never played an alcoholic, not even a scene in an acting class. So that was a challenge. It was fun. And the show was welcomed. They seemed to like the show. And I began to get offers for many other challenging parts. And I did quite a few live television shows.
Was it right after The Hustler that you essentially retired from acting?
Yes. After The Hustler, I was offered parts that were exactly the same role I'd play in The Hustler, and not as well written, just cheap, junky stuff. And I just got tired of turning it down. And it looked like nothing new was on the horizon. And I had done a 20th anniversary of The Glass Menagerie, and it was very successful. We ran a long time. I just got tired of reading all the junk that was being sent to me. So I was married, and we decided to give up our apartment in the city, and we moved to the country in a little house, a sweet old house. And we had a child and our animals, and I lived there for 15 years. I became a great bread baker, and I had a great life.
You got Carrie in a kind of unorthodox way, right? It wasn't Brian De Palma's idea to cast you. Wasn't it an executive at United Artists that thought of you?
Yes, it was. Marcia Nassiter is that executive. She was a wonderful friend of Pauline Kael. And since I was married to a film critic, they all knew one another. And I was sort of on the side. They knew me, but we were not close friends. But Marcia Nassiter remembered that she had known me, and when Brian was looking for the mother, she suggested me to, and I hadn't seen her for years because I was living in the country. She suggested me to Brian, and he said, "Piper Laurie, but she's too young." And I just saw her in The Hustler. And he said, "Well, Brian, that movie was 15 years ago." He said, "Oh, well, all right. I'll see if I can't meet her." So the first I heard was the agent who had represented me for years, who no longer did, called and said, "There's a script that's been sent to me." She said, "Darling, it's not an offer, but would you read it? And would you come into the city and meet with the director if you like it?"
Did you know who Brian De Palma was at the time?
No, I'd never heard of him.
He'd done a few pictures at that point, but Carrie was definitely his breakout. And I'm assuming you'd never heard of Stephen King, because that was his first book.
Right. It was a nice adventure. And so I I had no clothes except country clothes and baking clothes. For some reason, I grabbed this beautiful black velvet coat that my grandmother had left to me, that she'd made for herself. And I put that on, and I decided to wear that on the train into the city. And I went to Brian De Palma's office. And I remember there was someone in the office who greeted me. He said, "We used to go to high school together," which was nice and helped me not to be nervous. Because I hadn't been on an interview for years. So I went in and I spent a good deal of time with Brian, and he didn't ask me a thing about myself. He told me about himself as if he were auditioning for me. So I was at ease, and I thought, well, this is very nice. And then we said goodbye, and I went to the station, took the train back. By the time I got home, there was a phone call from my agent saying, Brian would likes you and would like you to be in the movie. So that was kind of shocking and sweet, really nice. Changed my whole life. Well, my whole family's life, really.
When you first read the script, had you heard of the book or read the book?
No, I read it, and I thought it was pretty silly. I didn't like it at all. I gave it to my husband to read, and he said, Brian De Palma has a comedic approach to everything he does. So I thought, maybe it's a comedy. So I thought, maybe there's room for something there. So on the basis of that, I said yes.
Reading it as a comedy or a dark comedy, is that what informed a lot of your choices? Because I could see a lot of actors, I would imagine, reading that role would play it just straight, just very scary. But you made so many interesting choices that you could watch it through a comedic lens or you could watch it through a horrifying lens. And weirdly to me, the funny aspects of it are what make it scarier.
I think I decided to go all the way over the top. It was the only thing that made sense to me, for her to be the cruelest, the worst. And maybe there would be some fun, maybe that would be comedic in some way. Yeah, I couldn't take any of it really seriously.
Some actors, if they play villains, they have to try to see the world through the villain's eyes so that, so the villain is right in their version of the story. Did you have that with Margaret White, or did you have kind of a distance from her because it was so big and operatic?
There's always something human in every moment of a character's dialogue or behavior. Even though it looks strange and big, and you can always find something to use that's real. And it has to be based, in reality, somewhere.
Do you remember what that was for you?
Here was a mother who was upset about her daughter, who cared about her daughter. My daughter was only 5, but still, I had the connection with another human being that was important to me. I think everything that Margaret suffered about came out of reality. It was just bigger.
You were talking about you as a child being shy and somewhat, inward. Did you relate to Carrie?
Oh, absolutely. I could have been little Carrie. Yes.
Did that make it difficult to play some of those scenes where you are so abusive to Sissy, or what was that dynamic like?
No. It was such fun. It was great fun. It was like being the evil witch. It was really childhood playtime for me, being a responsible mother of a 5-year-old little girl who was an angel, and being a good wife, I hope. And it was like a vacation to be there and to be bad and to do these horrible things and do it with gusto. And I enjoyed it so much, I can't tell you.
It definitely comes through because there is a joyousness to the character. It's one of those movies where when you're off screen, I'm always, when is
what are you doing?
You actually saved some of the lines in the movie, as I recall. The speech about Margaret's conceiving Carrie, weren't they going to cut that out completely? And then you convinced Brian to shoot it?
I remember we were at a rehearsal in Brian's apartment, and we were reading from our scripts at that point. And he said, and I can't remember specifically what those lines were, but they were important, I thought. And he said, no, and we're not going to use that line. I'm not going to use that line. And I said, oh, wait a minute. And I begged him to keep it because it seemed absolutely necessary for what I was thinking about her. And he said, oh, okay, if you feel strongly about it, that's fine. He was a wonderful director, very smart. But he also knew when to say no. He never said no to me.
Can you remember some examples of where you came up with some ideas that maybe he hadn't thought of or that weren't in the script?
If you do something that the director has no expectation about, sometimes they'll just cut right as you do it. You don't even have a chance to finish the moment. And I didn't want that to happen to me. My thought was killing her child was really a wonderful thing. And also her attitude towards the sex, which she finally acknowledged, from her gut, that would really be truthful. And I just wanted him I wanted to say, okay, Piper, do give it a try. And that's what he did. And so I felt free to do that, to love the idea of the sexuality, that even though she begins talking in a negative way about it.
That's interesting you mentioned that because that's kind of how you played your death as well, right?
Yes, and that wasn't planned. It was just sort of, I knew I'd had his permission. I just knew he would. And, I was supposed to be moaning or something, making some sounds of death. So I figured, well, why not that? Because in a way, her dying and her daughter's dying was sort of the ultimate joy because she was joining whatever she believed in.
Did you ever get to meet Stephen King?
It may have been the first or second day I was on the set. And I turned around because I saw a movement. And I saw a man standing there just 6 feet away in the shadows. We were both in the shadows. And I don't know how I knew that he was Stephen King, but I did, because he wasn't famous then. But I saw him watching. He looked like a very shy person, and he didn't communicate with me at all, nor did I with him. But I do remember him standing there watching and kind of looking at me out of the corner of his eye.
Were there any indications at the time that you were working on something special?
There was no sense of we're doing something special, truly. It was very special to me because I hadn't been acting or been in a movie for 15 years, and it was great fun. And everyone was very nice, and I remember the last day of shooting, they had a cake for me, a welcome back Piper cake. It was very sweet, and I loved, the whole process, and it was just fun. I had a great time, and the very last day, I brought my daughter to the set. We took pictures of her eating cookies and apple cider, and you can see the decorations from the dance sequence in the background.
Do you remember the first time that you saw the movie? Was it with an audience?
It was with an audience, yes.
What was that like, especially with that ending?
My husband and I and my 2 friends, we went to Westwood, and we had sushi at a restaurant, and it was Halloween night, and it was a midnight screening. And after dinner, we walked down the street and went into the theater, and there were a lot of people there. A lot of people from the movie, I guess, but I didn't know many of them. And I had a lot of sake at dinner. So I was well protected. And I sat there, and, it was fun to see. My usual agony at seeing myself, wasn't as awful as it normally would be. So there it was, and there was me, big face doing it. And everyone seemed to like it. It was nice. It was fun. The whole thing was fun.
That's so great to hear because, you sometimes hear of those experiences, especially horror movies where you see actors going through You know, you'd think seeing you getting pierced with 100 knives that would be a miserable experience.
Oh, no. I had fun shooting all that stuff. It was so big and it was such fun. But you know, usually when you go to see yourself in a movie, your expectations are so high, you know, but I had none. You know, I'd had a great time making it and I had no expectations for anything after that.
I'm assuming you didn't expect an Academy Award nomination, right?
Absolutely not. I was really shocked.
Was there any chatter beforehand that you were maybe, you know, the days leading up maybe going to be nominated, or was it just...
No, but I don't hang out with people who, you know, would be chattering. It was a big surprise, really.
Especially for a horror movie.
Yes. And, you know, most people in the business don't go to see them. So that was surprising.
This past week I watched Children of a Lesser God, which I'd never seen before, and it was really interesting watching that on the heels of Carrie, because you were playing a mother, but it felt like almost an exact opposite of the mother from Carrie. And I was wondering, when you took that role, how you approached it, and if Margaret White was ever in your mind at all.
When Margaret White went up in the fire, when the house burned down, she was gone. Never to return. But that's how it is with parts. It is for me anyway, you know, that goodbye.
You do seem to have a very strong intuition about, I guess, the grandness of a movie, of when to essentially dial it up with Margaret White or to be more subdued, like Children of a Lesser God. Is there anything that goes into that consideration, or is it just kind of you take what the part gives you and give it back?
The playwright or the writer decides that. And so every time you open up to page 1, it's a whole new experience, another planet.
Is that always an exciting time for cracking open page 1 of a script?
Absolutely. Especially if you're anticipating that, you know, you've heard that it's a wonderful writer or that there are wonderful people going to be in it. Your expectations, mine anyway, are high, you know, and then I calm myself down and sit down. And sometimes we'll have a glass of wine, get as relaxed as I possibly can, and make sure I have no interruptions. And I start to read. Yeah, it's an important time because you're opening your life to a new life, really, a new place, a new planet. And all those first impressions are very important.
I can't let you go before asking you about Twin Peaks, because I love Twin Peaks. Sometimes when actors sign on for David Lynch movies or TV shows, it ends up becoming something very different than what they thought they were signing on to. Did you know it was even going to be a TV show, or was it supposed to be a movie initially?
It was supposed to be a one-shot television show, a 2-hour television show. And I had met David Lynch a few times in the company of friends. And I thought he was awfully nice and smart. And I'd seen all of his work. And I thought it would be lovely to work with him. And so when I was told he was doing a movie and there was a very small part, I let my agents know I was interested. And they sent me a script. And there was a teeny little part. I had one line in it. I think the character said, "You bitch." And then she's gone. And I thought, well, it'll be fun to work with him.
So you never really expected that in season 2 you'd be playing a Japanese man?
No, I didn't expect it to go to a series. It was just a big movie, a television movie. And then I had signed the contract that said, "You're in the television series." And so that's where I was. And it ended up in the second season that David called me and said, "Rosie, we're going to have your character disappear, and no one will think she's died, or they won't really know for sure. But I want you to sneak back into town as a different character and cause a lot of trouble for all the people. And I want you to pick the kind of character you want to be, Spanish, Chinese, or whatever." And so we were on hiatus at that time. So that was such a great gift. It was like a fairy tale for me. I could invent my own character. And that's what I did. I decided to be a Japanese businessman.
Maybe inspired by all that sake you drank for the Carrie premiere.
Perhaps. Yeah, maybe I thought there would be some sushi in it for me.
You did that all in secret, right? That nobody knew that you were...
No one knew. Not even my agents or my parents or my sister. My sister began to have asthma attacks again because she thought I'd been cut from the show when my name was no longer there.
Was there a period where you were finally outed, where people caught on, or do you remember when that was?
Well, occasionally I hear after the fact of people, I thought your hands weren't made up, or they had some reason. But one of the newspapers in town did a long interview with me as Fumio Yamaguchi. We made up excuses why I couldn't meet with this reporter. And so we did it on the telephone, and I had my interpreter with me. So he didn't have to listen to my fake Japanese talking too much. And we spoke for maybe half hour and then hung up, and then 2 minutes later I went up the stairs to the office where the reporter was. Anyway, it was a wonderful, hilarious moment when he realized that it was me.
You were basically doing Borat before Borat.
Yeah, right.
Great success.
I will say I highly recommend your memoir.
Oh.
I had a chance to read that, and that was really wonderful.
Thank you. I put 3 years into that. Really, it was a wonderful 3 years. At the moment, I'm doing a book of short stories. It's not ready. I need more stories. And I shall do what Stephen King suggests. Just sit and write.
Well, thank you for doing this, Piper. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
It was truly an honor speaking with Piper Laurie, and although she's no longer with us, her incredible work lives on. If you'd like to throw in a few bucks to keep the Stephen Kingdom up and running, be sure to support our Patreon, where our patrons get access to all sorts of exclusive content, including deleted scenes, early access to episodes, and your name in the credits. Be sure to subscribe to the Stephen Kingdom channel here and check out our past interviews here, and for all of our previous Carrie episodes, click here. And finally, don't forget to check out the Stephen Kingdom podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Long days and pleasant nights, Constant Watchers.